Hi, my name's Sean Bouquet. I teach violin, viola, and cello lessons at Detroit Violin Company as well as at home. And I want to go over how to tune your instrument. Now I'm going to go through the violin, viola, and the cello. There's 3 different types of setups that I have, so I'm going to be able to hopefully go through whatever different setups you have. I'm going to start with the cello because we have fine tuners down here. What's going to really help is having a tuner to use. There's different types of tuners you can purchase. I like to use phone applications, and one that works really well is called INS Tuner or Instuner, however you want to pronounce that. This one is completely free, or there's a free version of it. So if you've never used a tuner before, it's quite simple. When you pluck a note, you'll see a needle on the top of the screen. We'll move around. When you pluck a string, needles jump around a bit on all tuners for violin, viola, cello, and bass. And so I really suggest using a bow for this. When I play this A, my tuner actually says I'm a little bit sharp because the needle is to the right. Most of the time, 99% of the time, if your string is out of tune, it will be flat. So this is a rare occurrence, it is actually sharp. Using these fine tuners down here, they'll be the same for the violin or the viola or the cello. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If I loosen this screw, it will lower the pitch. So since it's a little bit sharp, I could loosen the screw that's down here. And let's check this again. If I play the string, I'm actually a bit flat. So I'm going to take that fine tuner and tighten it a little bit. Let's check it again. That's pretty good. It's pretty close. And we'll do it for the rest of the string. So then we have the D string. That one again is a little bit sharp. Now if you're really fancy, you can play with the bow and move your hand around the instrument this way to tune at the same time. But I will just loosen that one. We can check it again. Good. And then let's go for a G. That one's pretty good. And then C. Ooh, that one's really sharp. So I'm going to loosen this fine tuner. Ooh, too loose. Let's tighten it a little bit. That's pretty good. Now don't worry so much with the fine tuners. If you loosen it too much, the screw's going to come out, but the string's not going to go flying or anything, so you just have to tighten it back up. There'll probably be a point that if you loosen it, you can feel it kind of click in a way where you're not going to have tension anymore, and at that point, the string's not really going to loosen anymore anyway. And if you tighten it too much, we want to avoid that, but it's really difficult to break a string by tightening a fine tuner too much. Not saying it's not going to happen, but just be careful with that. If you think it's too tight, loosen it. It's always better to go too loose than it is to go too tight. Now, let's say it is too loose or too tight, but your fine tuner isn't going to do enough. That's where we can use these pegs. Now, your pegs are probably just a stick of wood stuck inside that stick of wood. So if it gets knocked, or if you're not pushing in when you turn, the whole string is gonna come loose and the string could just fall out. It's not broken, it's just loose. When you turn your string, you always want to push the peg into the peg box. Realistically, I often have to push almost as hard as I can to have that go in. And sometimes it does take a lot of force to get that peg to stick in there. So let's say if my C string was just way too loose and I couldn't tighten anymore. So I'm actually going to loosen this a bit and pluck. So that's way too loose. It's not even really registering too well, but it's a B, almost a B flat. So I'm going to take the C peg. Even though we know the string is loose, we're not going to tighten it yet. Whenever I tension a string, I always go loose first to feel what the string tension's like, what the peg is like. Because it's just a stick of wood stuck inside this stick of wood, depending on the temperature, the humidity, that peg is going to change. Sometimes it's going to be really stuck, sometimes it will be really loose. So I'm going to push in, I'm going to push into the peg box, and I'm going to loosen it, which, because the way the peg is, I'm going to turn it down. So I'm going to push in. Sometimes I like to pluck when I turn, and I turn as small of a movement as I can. Like that. Keep pushing in, I'm going to go up little by little. And I'm not going to try to get it perfectly in tune. I'm going to get it close enough to where I can use the fine tuner. So I'm going to keep pushing in. Ooh, that's too far. That's pretty close. It shows a C. So I'm going to now check this. It's pretty close. Let me tighten the fine tuner now. Oh, too much. There we go. I'm going to go to the violin next. I'll go to the viola third because of a special peg that I have on there. If you notice on the violin, I only have one fine tuner on here. You'll see with professional instruments, they'll often take off some of the fine tuners, and that's because it can help the instrument resonate a little bit better. And this fine tuner is not built into the tailpiece like the cello one was. It's an extra add-on to it, but it functions the exact same. So as I play the note, if I tighten the screw, it brings the pitch up. If I loosen it, brings the pitch down. Be very careful with violin and viola fine tuners, especially the ones that add onto the instruments, the ones that look like metal like this. If we look underneath this tailpiece, you'll see the black part down here. Now this one has a nice little rubber stopper on it, so if I tighten this too tight, it's going to not press into the instrument as hard. But I see a lot of instruments that have damage down here because they tighten the fine tuner, and the fine tuner actually digs into the instrument. So you don't want to go too tight where it does that. If that's the case, we want to loosen and use the pegs. But it's the same idea for the pegs. As I pluck the string, that A is way too loose. So what I'm going to do, take the peg, push in. I'm first going to go loose, because that was really clicky, so that was really stuck. And then tighten it little by little. And that's pretty close. As you get better at tuning, you can practice tuning holding the instrument up. I like to put one finger around the scroll so I can push in with that finger as I turn. Pretty good. A trick that you can do if you don't have fine tuners and you just want to fine tune it, if you push the string down up top, it'll bend the pitch a lot, but it'll kind of stay higher up. So the A was pretty good. If I push the string down, now you see I'm about 9 cents sharp. It works as well by stretching the string. So if I stretch the string out, now a bit too flat. Like that. And then we can do the rest for the D and the G. I go flat. Then we push down a little bit here. Oh, that's too much. There we go. So I go loose. That's a bit too sharp. I'm going to stretch out the string. Stretch it out some more. There we go. This might take you some time. It gets much faster the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with your own instrument. One thing to note before I go to the viola is that when you're tuning, if you do pluck, as you see I still did sometimes, the needle jumps around. Some of the times the note is not actually correct in the tuner. And this happens because of vibrations of that frequency. And this really only happens when you pluck, not so much when you bow. That if I'm plucking A, it sometimes will say it's a D. Sometimes when I pluck D, it'll say G. When I pluck G, it might say C. All of these are actually pretty good, so I didn't get that issue with it. But it'll usually say, think it's a string lower. Now, if that's the case, using the bow will help. But if you know that that's an E, but your tuner keeps telling you it's an A, but you know it's an E and you know what that sound is, you can kind of trust your ear on that one. However, if it's saying A and you're actually super, super sharp, you want to tune down there. Okay, so I have one more instrument. Now this viola isn't different because it's a viola. They could have the same tuning pegs just like the violin and the cello. But these pegs are geared pegs. Sometimes you hear them called perfection pegs. Sometimes you hear them called the Whitner pegs. There are pegs that have different types of gears, but these are really common nowadays, or getting more common, especially with nilling instruments. And there's actually gears inside of here. The pegs have a 1:4 gear ratio, meaning if I turn the peg all the way around, it turns the string only 1/4 of a turn. So they're kind of like fine tuners right here. These can be loosened and tightened depending on how much you pull the peg out. So if I pull this peg out a little bit, you kind of have to wiggle it to do so. It makes it loose, and then it'll kind of loosen on its own a little bit. It won't really stay put. So what I want to do whenever I want to sort of reset that string, I'll push that peg inward. As I tune. But these pegs are stuck in the peg box so they don't come loose, and they're not going to really come loose too easily. But I have seen times when they do need to be reset, which is basically pulling them out, pushing back in a little bit. So that is how you tune a string instrument. If this is your first time tuning, this might take more time than just the length of this video. If you have questions on it, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below. It's always better to be safe with your strings than really rush it. Even with 20 years of experience, I'll still sometimes break a string by going farther than I mean to. So again, leave a comment below if you have any questions, and thank you very much for watching.